Oh, this is the Tune It Over takeover with the Physio Matters First Steps. We're here. We're going to be here every first Tuesday of the month. My name's Reese, and we've got Amelia
Hey.
and Farouk here today.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
So what we're going to talk today about is what to expect on your placement and how to prepare the best way for your placement to get started. So please do comment with any questions and we'll respond towards the end of the session. If you've got any comments or questions that you have around your placement, or if you're a educator that you want to make any comments, let us know anything that you do. So this is based on our own experiences or some pocket guides that we have as well, of which we'll put resources in the comments at the end also. So to start with, I'm going to ask a few questions of Amelia and Farouk on how they found their placements and what's going on at the moment with COVID as well. As we mentioned on last week's Tune It Over with Jack, my placement was due to start yesterday, but it actually got cancelled due to a COVID outbreak. So I've done all the prep for it, but I haven't actually got on placement yet. So I'm still waiting for that. So to start off with, like, I know, Amelia, you've had a few placements. Farouk, you're working at the moment.
Yeah.
So Amelia, how have you found your placements going through the COVID pandemic at the moment?
I've only ever done like assessed placements within the pandemic, so it's difficult in that I don't have like that comparison, but I know that things can change at short notice a lot more. So like with placements being delayed or changed, or the area changing that you'll be going in and things like that, and you've got to be more careful in terms of your PPE on placement and things like that. There's just a lot more to consider, and there are a lot more worries and things that you're thinking about than normal. But everyone's on the same boat of placement, and the staff are doing as much as they can with the pandemic. So you're just sort of like happy to support and help out and get as much learning from it as you can.
What were you? Have you been on a respiratory or MSK? What kind of placements?
I've been on an online virtual MSK placement, so we were doing telephone consultations, and then I've also been on a stroke rehab unit. So the stroke rehab unit was operating fairly much as before the pandemic, just with increased levels of PPE and changes in patient levels. And then we did have a ward closure at some point during that, but it was a really positive experience, and I still learned a lot with the team and everything. And then I had on my virtual placement doing telephone consultations. That was really good. I was a bit nervous because like, how am I going to be motivated just checking in every day from home and stuff, but I still found it really useful, and I was able to keep in touch with my clinical educator really regularly, and they were really helpful. And I found that it really increased my clinical reasoning skills because you had to know a lot more about the condition and the specific questions that you were asking. So it really helped me develop my subjective assessment skills. So yeah, it was really useful in terms of that. So each placement was different in terms of what I learned from them. Like the stroke rehab one was more about my handling skills and things like that. But yeah, I was just really happy to get out on a placement and learn. Like I was like, oh my gosh, a placement.
I think when I eventually do get out on placement, I'll be the same, just excited and looking forward to it. So Farouk, I know you're working at the moment. So did you graduate last summer, or did you have any placements during COVID and before?
I graduated last summer. But the interesting thing is that my last placement was actually cancelled. It was actually in neuro, which is ironic because I'm currently working in community neuro. So my last placement, which was neuro, inpatient, was cancelled. So I haven't had any placements during the pandemic. I only had to go through the later half of my, finishing my degree in the pandemic. But just based off the placement, so this good Amelia has the experience of what it's like now currently in placements. However, most of my placements were before the pandemic, and then working in the pandemic now, I can already even see the stark differences between the two styles of working, where you're having, even if you're talking not about just PPE wise, that's a whole topic in itself.
Yeah.
The things you have to do every time, and it's a process. It takes like 5-6 minutes just to get your stuff on, get it off, and those type of protocols. One of the interesting things about my placements that I had before was background was, I think I had one in trauma and orthopedics. I had one in cystic fibrosis, which is respiratory. I had gerontology, and I had MSK outpatients. Now, all those ones were completely, different the style of what we were doing. Back then, obviously, NHS always has the issue of staffing. It always has this is an issue that has always been there
Yeah.
for years. Now, during this pandemic, it only brings it out. So as you can imagine, and you guys have had issues now with placements due to multiple staffing, either not enough staff to be able to feel like they can support students as well as
Yeah.
also, do their job, which has always been an issue for multiple years now. It's just been really stretched as much as possible now. Or basically, I can always imagine all my placements that I had, there was always the issue. It was always there somewhere. Even now, as I'm working, I think both places I've been, there's always some staffing issues, which is a big issue when you're talking about placements because, students need qualifieds to be able to, take you. And then for me, so I don't go off topic too much. It's a catch-22 where you need to train students with placements so that you guys can come and work as well. However, if we're not able to give you placements as well, how are you going to come as well? And then the staff shortages keep going, and it's basically a slippery slope of you don't have staff, you're not going to be able to train students, and then you're not going to have staff because the students aren't ready, and it's a big problem. And for me, the differences between the two of working non-pandemic and during pandemic are almost night and day, because now there are increased loads on all services, and it's completely appreciable because now we have waiting list and we're trying to get through the waiting list as best as we can. And it's just basically brought forward a lot more issues that were already there before and basically taking them to the max.
Taking it back to your placements, what did you do best to prepare for the placements? Amelia, you've had some going over with COVID, and Farouk, you've had some prior to COVID. So what would you do to prepare yourself best for placements? Start with you, Farouk.
I think, preparation for placements, for me, my style of learning is I always call it adaptable because I don't like to give. I adapt to things, but absolutely preparation is a big one. They're the basic common tips that you would always give. That you always try to reach out beforehand. Reach out to your educator, ask those questions so you know what to expect. Because I think for one of my placements that I struggled the most was one that, I'll be honest, I got sent what I sort of looked over. I didn't look over it as well as I could. And when I got there, they were asking me these questions and I felt, ashamed. I was like, oh, I wish I should have looked a lot more into it. And it's asking those type of questions. What type of patients will you be seeing? What type of, demographics are you seeing? And another very important one is what are the, referral pathways? Basically, what options do you have in the trust? Because, if you talk about, for the actual community, you might be able to refer to speech language. Just having it, obviously, depending on what level of placement, if it's your first or it's your last, the type of question or what they would expect from you it can be vastly different. However, knowing that beforehand, it gives you two things. It allows you to look a lot smarter and get you some extra more points and extra marks in placement, but also just it lets you transition smoothly because you don't want to get in there and you feel like, oh my God, this is all overwhelming. So having that, previous knowledge of, okay, so these are the type of patients, let me go quickly read up on them and figure out what to do beforehand. Those are kind of very good, important topics. And I can go a lot more, but I'll let Amelia have some. So I don't.
Yeah, I love the practical side of preparation. So I like to do a dry run of getting there. So I know how long it takes there, what time I need to get up in the morning. And there's always ridiculous methods for car parking. Sometimes you need to pay with about £10 coins or something, and I don't have coins anymore. So it's just figuring out the car parking situation is also important. And then just asking about what uniform you need to wear and, just practical stuff like that. And how are you going to relax the weekend? Because it's a different sort of pace of life to university. Yeah. So you just need to think about, what you're going to be able to do when you're on placement. Sometimes I have to be right, I won't be able to do that I would normally do. And at the weekends, I'm just going to, make sure I'm focusing on relaxing and resting or, things like that. So just considering that as well.
Yeah. One of the things, just to add to what you've both said there, which was fantastic points, is I put something on Twitter last week and got some great feedback. I've never done anything on where I was pediatrics I was going for, and I had didn't know where to start. So I put something on Twitter, got some really good feedback and got some good points, and ended up getting one of the recommended readings for the book. So definitely use social media as well as your dry run. Go into, there might be certain nuances that you're not sure about getting to, and as Farouk says, make sure you know the NHS pathway for the trust that you're at as well. That's perfect. So moving forwards now, going for it.
Sorry, I just want to quickly add one thing. I think you hit it right with using social media, because a lot of people tend to be afraid. I will be honest. Sometimes, as much as I use social media, I use it for my podcast XYZ. Sometimes I don't know if the right word is, scared to post something out there. You're worried you might not get responses, or you're worried you might look dumb, or you're worried about this. And sometimes you just need to get over that. As Rhys said, you ask a question. I asked a question not long ago about neuro, and I got some amazing feedback, and those are the resources I'm using. So, just putting yourself out there and asking those questions, and the community can be brutal, physio community, but it also has very good sides of very helpful, and overall, that's the overarching image.
Yeah, and you can tag us at PM First Steps if you want it to reach more people, and we'll happily retweet it for you. So.
Yeah, social media can be a mindstorm of overwhelming information, but if you want information out, tag us. We can share it with some relevant people and tag other people into it as well. So what was your big tips, so to speak, if you're on placement? How would you maximize getting the most out of your placement? So Amelia, we'll start with you.
So one thing that I found that I didn't realize on my first placement was that you have like this learning agreement. It'll probably be different for different universities, but you have like goal setting of what you're going to achieve. And the idea is to make it so it's an active thing throughout the placement. It's not just something you do at the beginning, but it's something, you check in with your educator, like at the end or the beginning of each week, to be like, are we on track? Are we hitting those things that I need to get from this placement? And also a drive to make sure that you get what you need from that placement. Like, be clear of there's so many things you can learn on placement. It's a bit overwhelming at times. So it's just easy to start with, a couple of simple goals and be like, this is what I need to do. This is what I want to learn. If I don't learn, everything, that's okay. But as long as I get these key skills out of it, that's what I want to take away from it. So it's like using that learning agreement. That would be my tip.
So being proactive with what you want to learn, get from it.
Yeah, because no one else is, that your clinical educators there to support you, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to get that learning out of placement. Like, you're going to be an independent practitioner, and you're a clinical educator, and your university will support you, but you'll be the one treating the patients when you are qualified. So it's up to you to be proactive. Yeah.
Really? Anything to add, Farouk?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with what Amelia said about the proactivity level, and the importance of it is because, again, the level of placement and what the goals you expect are always dependent on what placement it is. Because as first placement, that's where you really want to grab that learning, but by your last one, you really want to get to the point where you're more independent. Because sometimes Band 5, especially during this time, I think particularly, is where. And I wouldn't say you're getting less support, but it would be a lot more helpful, like when you get a Band 5, to be more independent. So they don't require that much support. So it's really important to use that time while you're still learning to get as much information as you can. And the burden of knowing what to ask and what to do is actually upon yourself. You know what I mean? It's up to you. Obviously, your educators want you to learn, but they will only push you to the point where they feel you are comfortable, if you understand what I mean. For example, if they've identified that you may be, and it's realistic, your needs may be a lot more than someone else, but you feel like your needs are a lot more, you want to know that more, you have to then show them and take that proactive initiative in order to gain as much information as you can, or ask the right questions, because to show them also, again, this also helps your marks when you're able to show that you're willing to learn, you want to learn more, and you're not just settling back in a role and just taking it as it is, because that communication is very important. And that's a very big tip, is communicating with your educator, making sure everything is clear, because you don't want to get to your 4th week, 5th week, and you only have one more week left. And then that's when you're expressing, oh yeah, I want to do this, or I wish I could do this. Then you have a condensed time that they can't grade you enough. So setting it out from the start of your placement what do you want to learn, what do you want to do, where you think you are. And by the end of the first week, second week, you should be able to get a proper grip of, where you see yourself in a few weeks, or what you fully want to achieve out of this whole placement.
Would you do that goal setting? Sorry, Amelia.
So I just wanted to say that we've got a comment in the chat. So I don't know if you want to from Joe. So I don't know if you want to mention that at the end or.
So what I was going to say is, would you do that in the first week that you're in placement, or would you do that before you go to placement? Getting the goal setting, that is.
In the first week. There's no need to set goals before you go. Just have an idea of what you want to get out of it beforehand, like a rough idea. And then when you go, discuss it with your clinical educator, and they will know what's sort of achievable, and you can within that area, but you can also bring your own experience of what you're hoping for, and then just check in with that regularly. So it's not like you get towards the end of your placement, it's like, oh, did I do any of those things? Yeah. That's what I found helpful, but I didn't learn that until I was on placement. That's what was expected.
I think after your first placement, or even if that first one, and that's where coming into line of, before having that prep of, you're going into gerontology, knowing what type of patients you'll be seeing, what type of demographic, what are the illnesses. That way, even if you go your first week and you're telling your educator, oh, I heard about this, and then you can figure out which ones are realistic to what we are going to know. Because you can't really set, it's almost impossible to set goals prior to your placement if you don't know exactly what they're doing there, how it.
Yeah, that's what Kim has just said in the chat.
Is that what you said? Okay, Kim. Yeah, because it's almost, you can't know. It's only going there with expectation to say, oh, I would like to learn this, and you figure out, can I learn this on this placement? Is that what we're doing here? But ultimately, it will be dependent on what you're actually doing on that placement. And as Amelia said, I think the first week is a good week to gauge. And during most placements, that first week is where you get settled and you figure out what you're doing. You're setting all your goals, and you're figuring out, okay, what am I actually realistically going to learn from here? But one thing I will add is, after that first week and you get your grounding, it's very important to show proactivity. I remember my gerontology one, for a presentation, I decided, let's check out the elderly mobility score just to see if it's a practical thing. And that type of thing is one thing that they'll look at you and say, we may not have been doing it on the ward, but we are open to try it. Obviously, it gives you good extra marks, and then you figure out, is this actually practical for where I am working? So it comes in line with that proactivity and setting it within the first 2 weeks of your placement most of the time, as Amelia said.
Absolutely. That's a good point as well, that obviously you mentioned Farouk. I thought you were reading Kim's comment there.
Very coincidental.
Say that it's impossible to set goals before a placement, because I think if you're a student like myself, or obviously you as well, Amelia, for me, not having a placement yet, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of what am I meant to do to maximize. So what I look at, is potentially adding to the anxiety of, oh God, I need to set these goals, but I don't know what to expect. So doing that in the first week or the second week would be ideal, and sitting down with your educator as well to set those goals in a proactive two-way conversation, not just your educator telling you these are the goals there. So speaking of the first week, we've got a comment there from Kim. Any tips on cutting down the first week admin? So Amelia, what would you say about the admin that's in the first week?
I would say just have a list of what you really need to do, what is essential to do. There's some things that you can do that are extras if you've got time, that the university wants you to do, that are good for your learning, but make sure you know what the essentials are so you hit them. But also there is going to be a lot of admin, so just be aware of that and make sure you're setting yourself aside enough time and making your clinical educator aware of the admin that you have to do, so that you have enough time. Because the last thing that I want to do is come home when I'm really tired and do lots of stuff in the evening. So I try and get as much of it done during placement hours as possible, because it is really tiring being on placement. So and the admin does take time, so you just got to allow for it. But it is tough. But that would be my tip.
I think in order to cut down admin, it's the most important thing you have to realize is some of it is Absolutely, it's grueling, but it's necessary. But the one thing you can do is, and this may people may it may come up one way or the other, is you need to pester your educator to get it done within that first week, to try anything, basically, as we said before, goal setting, anything that you need to be done, because what you don't want is to drag it along into the next weeks, because at that point, if you're imagining you're trying to build a small caseload or build something, and then you're still worrying about, oh, I haven't signed off this, or I haven't filled out this form. You really want to try and do it within those first few days. And that's something that I find educators are, quite good with. But some, it's life. Some people different than others. But you can always try and pester in a sense to say, oh yeah, we need to quickly do this and this and this, because you don't want to be taking it into next week. But some, to be honest, the first week admin is almost inevitable. But the important thing is trying not to drag it into the next coming weeks, because that also, some people may interpret it that it doesn't look good on your side if you're not, proactive, showing that you really want to get all these things done so you can actually establish what is non-admin stuff you need to be doing. I hope that answers the question, Kim. It's a difficult one, but it's inevitable that admin, but you can get on top of it as soon as possible to get it wrapped up.
For those like myself that haven't had that first week, what kind of admin can you expect going into placements? Obviously, you've got your SOAP notes, your notes, clinical notes. Is there anything added to that?
I think it's different for each university, and I would just check with your university. I feel like we could, that is all I'm going to say. It's completely different for each university. So,
yeah, I think, I said it's different for universities, and it's different from trust to trust. So,
yeah.
So this is the best advice I can give on that front of what to expect is, you might go into a trust and the first week you're running through their own trust, student placements, where they're telling you, what a student can do, what a student cannot do, what are your limitations, how to get your notes signed off. Are you on an electronic system? Are you paper-based? Those are the type of things you might get in that first week. While some other places they're basically using whatever your university has given them. In that, I'm sure each of us have those booklets, student placement booklets. So that's what they will just give you and say, we're going to run through with this, and we don't have specific trust stuff. So it's always trust based, and uni to uni. So it's very dependent, and knowing which one it is beforehand might give you a bit of a helping hand. But I would, your first day, you probably will find out all of that on that placement, your first day. So don't worry too much about it.
For someone like myself who's either not gone on placement yet, or someone who's just started, because I know my university's literally started yesterday, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's very anxious about starting their placements? What would be the best advice you could give them?
Let you go, Amelia, for it.
I would just say, you're going to be anxious, just sort of accept it. Everyone feels that way before placement, and you're not alone in feeling like that. The way that I personally handle it is through preparation, like doing that dry run, making sure I've spoken to the placement so I'm clear of what I'm expected to do on the first day, what's expected of me. And like, as you say, posting on Twitter, get a bit more information about the area. And I also, like, if I've got any concerns on placement, I'll message my other physio course mates, because they're always good at supporting me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm well nervous about going to placement tomorrow. And they're like, it's okay, you can do it, Amelia. And just getting that positive reinforcement. But I know I can always speak to my university or my clinical educator if I've got any problems and if anything's going wrong, because everyone expects that things are going to, go a bit differently within the pandemic. No one's expecting you to be like this perfect student, especially within these sort of situation and scenario. Like, everyone's aware there's a pandemic going on, so you've just got to give yourself a bit of a break, be kind to yourself. You're turning up, you're doing the best you can, and that's enough. And it's okay to be out of your comfort zone. You've got to be aware of what you can do safely within clinical practice, but it is all learning, so it is going to feel a bit uncomfortable. And I like to know what I'm doing, so I find it difficult. But, we are learning, and you've just got to tell yourself that you're not going to know everything straight away.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's an important point. Is you've mentioned we have a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group with all the students of my year in. And I feel like sometimes that's not maybe used as much, but we can lean on each other. We can ask each other questions, and lean on each other with regards to some anxieties around, especially going on at the moment with COVID and restrictions around placement. So what about yourself, Farouk? What would you give to students?
I think Amelia answered it very well, and so I would repeat to everything she said. But the one I want to hammer on is using your friends who have had. A lot of the times you'll find your friend has had a similar placement before. So that can really be a way you can use to calm yourself down. When you ask them, okay, so what can I expect? What can I expect? What is it like there? Is it busy? Is it this? Because the most of the times, anxiousness and anxiety comes from not knowing, when you're not sure what to expect, when you're going in there, you feel like you're going in blind and anything can hit you with anything. When you ask someone and they tell you, they can give you a rundown of, my first week was like this. Those type of things can help calm your nerves. So I had a placement and my friend had one. I just told him, I said, this is how the word is, this is how it could be, this is how your educator might be as well. So when you have the adequate preparation, you can expect those type of things. It helps you bring those nerves down. And as I said, everyone works a bit differently, where you have someone like me who I don't get too anxious very often, because it's not a brag or anything. I just I have my mechanism which don't allow me, like Phil says, which don't allow me to panic too much. I don't like to panic at all, but I can understand. I used to have that sometimes where I would be a bit anxious, and it's completely natural. But with preparation beforehand, it can really help drop your nerves down to the floor if you even choose to.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing a trial run, as we talked about before, doing the prep really does reduce that anxiety that I've found. So you can't control everything going into a placement, but you can control the travel time and things like that by preparing in advance. Is there any, apart from those aspects, is there anything that we should really know going into placements, research going into placements? Like, I know Amelia mentioned about red flags in a previous conversation and soap notes and stuff. So is there anything really that we should brush up on going into a placement to treat patients? Start with you, Amelia.
I think they don't expect you to know everything going on to placement. So I just asked them what the specific placement would find the most useful. I know that I found, not that I've done this, but soap notes are really important because I wasn't sure how to write them. But just brushing up on how to write soap notes would be useful. Yeah, and I don't know, knowing different stats or having a notebook just so that if there are things that you don't know on placement, you can just write it down and then make sure you have a bit of time to read up on it as you go, because you learn as you go.
Yeah, that's one that comes up, is having a small notebook with you in your pocket, make notes as you're going along. Absolutely. Yeah. What about yourself, Farouk?
Yeah, I think the big ones for me that you should know is red flags, because the honestly, one of the easiest ways easiest to hardest, however you take it, ways to fail a placement or to be very flustered is when you do something unsafe. Now, safety, everyone knows that safety is always a priority of either student or anywhere. So red flags are always a good one to know. If there's nothing else you take going in, it's at least red flags. And I think Amelia said it, soap notes, just knowing. But that's where it comes to different people, because different people write soap notes different, and you have to acknowledge that. And obviously, by nature, your educator is going to start dragging you towards their style. And then when you have another educator, their style, and another educator, and before you finally figure out how are you going to write your notes with your own choice. Even till now, I'll write my notes a bit different from the next physio beside me. But the most important thing is that you're getting what you're supposed to be asking, and the important stuff are being written down there. Red flag questions are being crossed out. Safety concerns are being addressed. Those are the bare minimum, I would always say, for any placement, the safety and red flags that you need to know. I think Kim asked a quick question about IT systems. I'm just going to address that. IT systems are a nightmare in almost every place I've been. And that first week, getting patient notes is always it varies trust to trust. And some places you have paper, some places you have IT. And some places don't even give students access to the IT system. I've been in placements where they say, oh yeah, well, you don't get it, and you just have to use your educator's own. So it's just a difficulty that's almost inevitable. But some places are, a lot more smoother towards students. So you might not even have those issues with IT because you might be set up the first day you get there. So it's just different for everyone.
Absolutely.
I know we're coming towards the end of the show now, so don't know if we could quickly circle back to Joe's question.
Absolutely. I was going to say, obviously, the best thing to do is follow us on social media, PM First Steps, obviously Jack as well. So Joe mentioned any hashtags or anything that people could know that, I know for myself, I just put stuff out there and tag people I know who are going to be respectful and worth getting their feedback from. So the likes of Jack Chew, Farouk, James, Armstrong, who's part of Physio Matters and First Steps as well. What about you guys? Any tips for posting on social media, Farouk?
If you want to make sure it's obvious that you're a student, I'd just or what your position is, I'd just post it in that individual tweet. But if it says on your profile, then if people are interested, they can know. But I think you just got to ask those questions. Just have faith in yourself. The physio space is generally quite positive. So yeah. Yeah,
I'll just wrap up in a second. I think Joe has an interesting idea of using a hashtag, which is something we could look into, making a hashtag specific for, physical clinical questions that obviously you tag, PM First Steps and use that hashtag so that other people might just stumble across it. But it's something we might look into and see, because that's a good idea, actually.
Absolutely. So that's us running out of time now. We've run over a little bit, so hopefully Jack won't shout at us too much. I'm sure it'll be fine. But any finishing comments from yourselves that you'd like to add that we haven't spoken about yet? Amelia, or anything?
I just think that placements at this time can be difficult. So make sure you keep in contact with your course mates, your tutor, your clinical educator. If you have any difficulties at all, just speak to someone who you feel comfortable speaking to, because it is difficult at the moment. And, we want to make sure that you're getting the support that you need.
Yeah. And my final thing is I think the placements at this time particularly will be a lot more different and challenging. But however, when I always think of things and I think of how difficult they are, I think of the end of it when I get to the goal. And if you think about it, you've been through, I'm very similar like you've been through quite a few different things that are challenges, but you'll still keep going. And if you think about it, when you finish, qualify, it's going to be so much more rewarding, and you're going to have so much more, relevant experience in the sense of you'll know how things are going to go forward. Whereas some people are, changing with the times where you are, that's how you're going to know what to go forward. So, just have to keep pushing through and don't crack. You're diamond, man, don't crack.
Yeah. And my final thoughts would be a lot of people are stressed, a lot of students are stressed at the moment, and the lecturers trying to find us placements. It's sort of stress all around. So try and stay calm. If you want to contact us, and feel free to reach out to us. PM First Steps, or myself, Reese, Farouk, Amelia will attest to that. If anybody feels like they need to let out some steam, feel free to contact us, because sometimes it can get a little bit much talking behind a screen to everybody and not having that interaction face to face in person. So absolutely, but we will get there. We will get out on placement, and we will qualify in the end. And similar to what Farouk said, I remember saying that is train hard, race easy. So hopefully this training being so difficult and so challenging, when we do qualify, it might be a little bit easier. The expectations might be a little bit less. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Farouk, for taking time out of your day to join me and Amelia today.
Anytime.
Thank you.